I really need a freaking cameraman. Oh my God.
Is anyone willing to work for long hours and no pay?
I'm just kidding. Please don't send me your resumes. People actually did that last time I made a joke. Thanks, Linus, for having to actually hire people on a YouTube channel. All right, I think we're in focus there. Okay, so I'm gonna apologize ahead of time because I have got a head cold. Little Jay went back to school last week. And you know what kids do when they go back to school? They bring home germs, lots of them. And I've had all summer to just not have to deal with the germs of other kids at the school that my daughter just happens to be a host and a transportation device for. So guess what? I'm getting sick. But I have a video to do. I have to do this video and I cannot just lay in bed and play games on my laptop, which I would love to do, because I have work to do. So anyway, the only way I'm getting through this video today, and I might be talking really fast and I just realized that, is because I am all hopped up on drugs, Chip. I actually have taken Mucinex, I have taken saline nasal spray, and I have taken a Snickers bar. I don't really eat candy bars, but I needed something and I just don't have an appetite, and Monster energy drink. It's a 0-calorie one though, so don't judge me. Feeling a little bit out of body experience right now, if you know what I'm saying. So I apologize if this video is a little bit weird. You guys might actually enjoy it even more. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the review. Wow, when I turned my head right there, it was like a delay. It's crazy. The new Z170 classified motherboard from EVGA features 8-phase PWM, 4-way SLI support, along with top-notch components to offer gamers and enthusiasts more of what they want. A badass motherboard with no compromises. Click the link below to learn more. First up, R9 380 Nitro from Sapphire. Now, Sapphire has kind of taken the approach of, well, we hear you folks. You don't want orange graphics cards. You don't want blue graphics cards. You just want nice jet black graphics cards. So guess what they did? They made a black graphics card. So the R9 390 and the 380 Nitro are featuring black with gunmetal accents, which look really nice. They don't have any blingy LEDs shining all over the place, no glowing nameplates, no frou-frou type stuff, which other brands are known for doing. They are just giving you a hot mess right here, where it's just black and it looks good no matter what system you put it in. There is no backplate, unfortunately, on either of these two cards, and I know Sapphire is probably like,
God, Jay, will you get off your high horse about the backplates? We're trying to keep the cost down.
Well, you know what? I like backplates and that's not gonna change anytime soon. Not to mention I give everyone else crap for it, so I'll go ahead and do that too. I guess I wouldn't have expected one on this price point, but I probably would have on this price point. But anyway, they shaved 10 or 15 bucks off there by not putting a backplate. All right, we're moving on now. We'll stop talking about the backplates. You've got what looks like two 100mm fans on here, giving you lots of static pressure over the heatsink running the length of the card. Two 6-pin PCI Express power connectors on here for power delivery. And you do have a multi-BIOS switch on here. Now this isn't their normal push-button BIOS switch for like their UEFI BIOS. It's just a toggle, but you are going to have some BIOS to play around with on there. And then for connectivity, you have got DisplayPort, you've got HDMI, and a DVI-E, or DVI-I and DVI-D. What is DVI-E? I don't even know what DVI-E is. DVI efficient, I don't know. Anyway, this thing has got 985 megahertz, which is a factory overclock from Sapphire, and I believe it was 1425 megahertz on the RAM on this thing. It's also got 2 gigabytes of VRAM, which is going to place this card right around the 1080p performance range. Depending on the title, you might get away with some 1440p gaming. 4K gaming, not an option on this card, period. In fact, you will see it in the benchmarks, but that's only because I was just running the gambit of suites that I normally do. Pretty much ignore the 4K numbers. They're just kind of there because I was like, why not? But you really should pay attention to the 1080p numbers and some of the 1440p depending on the title when it comes to the 380. Now the 390 on the other hand, this thing is a little bit more capable of 4K gaming, sorta, and I'll tell you why in a moment, but first let's go ahead and do the walkthrough. Tri-X, 3 fans on this bad boy, keeping things nice and cool. 5 copper heat pipes, again, trying to keep the core as cool as possible. It actually does a really good job of it, and you'll see that in the charts. It's got a cooler that runs longer than the length of the card by about 1.5 inches. So you've got a ton of watts that's capable of being displaced on this cooler. In fact, the temperature stayed very respectable on this card, even when overclocked. Look at the charts if you want to know what those numbers were. The card is sporting 8 gigabytes of VRAM running at 1500 megahertz, also overclockable, which I did overclock it to 1600 megahertz for my testing. And it's got a 1010 megahertz core clock from the factory, again, an overclock over the reference 390, which I pushed all the way up to 1125 megahertz comfortably. I was able to push it all the way to 1150. However, it didn't pass some of my tests, so I backed it down to 1125 for a guaranteed stable clock that made it through all of my tests. So other than that, you do have the standard BIOS switch up here, which is a push button UEFI BIOS. It's going to glow blue. That's unfortunate because everything about this card is black, and then you've got a really bright, glaring blue LED if you happen to enable that BIOS. So maybe if they had made this white or even just toned down the brightness a little bit, I think it would have matched the aesthetics of the card a little bit better. Connectivity is different though on the 390. You've got a DVI, and then you have got 1, 2, 3 display ports and an HDMI. Again, sporting the solid black with gunmetal accents on here, looks fantastic at any angle. That's how it's going to kind of look in your system like that. You can see all of those fins on there, all those fins. Normally I would take this cooler off to investigate how the VRM and power delivery is being addressed, but it's not my card. I don't get to keep it, so therefore I am not going to take it apart. But I can tell you that they do have VRM cooling addressed on here, at least with, it looks like some heat sinks kind of stuck on there, as well as the major heat sink in the back here is touching the VRM through like a little transfer plate. It's not a direct copper heat pipe transfer of heat, but it is addressed anyways. It's not like they just glued on a couple of heat sinks and were like, best of luck VRM, hope you don't blow up. So they did address that. Let's go ahead and do the benchmarks. You guys can look at the charts and, like I said, kind of ignore the 4K numbers on the 380. I mean, like I said, it's not a 4K gaming card. It's not even really a 1440p gaming card. So definitely ignore that. All right, guys, let's go ahead and look at the benchmarks, and I'll see you after.
Transition.
Okay, so this is going to be a little different. I figured instead of just flashing all of the charts across the screen and expecting you guys to pause it, that we'll just take a few minutes here and we'll talk about each chart. I think that'll answer some questions, allows me to sort it and play around with it and actually present to you guys the charts in the way in which they're meant to be presented. All right, so first up we have core clocks. As I said, I used the 970 SSC, the Sapphire R9 380, the 390, and I used the R9 290X Matrix Platinum from Asus because currently that's the only 290X that I currently have. I'll say currently like 15 times in this video probably. That's the only card that I have fully benchmarked right now in all of these, so I'll be working more on that in the future. But as you can see, the 970 is clocking up to 1442. That's actually conservative. Most will hit 1500 plus, but that's where this particular card kind of crapped out. The 380 and the 390 Nitro both hit 1125. Now the 380 is a 985 megahertz, so it's got a bigger overclock than the 390, but the 390's got a bigger core and more stream processor, so it's going to be more powerful anyway, even though the processor is the same speed. And then the Matrix Platinum stopped at 1075, because, well, if you watch my review, you'll know that this card really didn't overclock very good at all. Temperatures! We have got this sorted highest to lowest, and obviously lower is better. And as you can see, once again, the 290 Matrix Platinum, 79 degrees at that overclock. That's kind of hot, in my opinion. I think it should be cooler. The 970 SSC OC hit 77. So what's awesome about this is, look at this, the 390 Nitro, 72 degrees Celsius overclocked. And then the 380 hit 71 overclocked. That is super low. That's one of the lowest I've seen AMD cards actually max out at. I mean, that's fantastic temperatures. Obviously that cooler is working. So next up is Firestrike. And we sorted this by the normal setting here. And then we could play around with Extreme and Ultra. But as you can see here, Firestrike doesn't tell the whole story. And this is why it's important that you don't only use synthetic benchmarks to draw your conclusions of graphics card performance. And here's why. The 970 SSC OC is hitting the highest scores almost, well, pretty much all around, for the most part, I guess. But what's happening here is this isn't giving you a true real-world gaming experience, and I'll show you why. But you can see the 390 is right on its heels of the 13204 versus the 13785. And then, as you could expect, we go down the list here with the 290X, then the Nitro unoverclocked or stock speeds. 970 SSC stock, you can see, was quite the jump once you overclock it. And then the 380 Nitro OC and non-OC, you can see they're down here, kind of where they would be expected to be. If we sort this by extreme numbers, you can see things don't really change much. But once you go to Ultra, you can see we only get some things playing around, down here in the lower range a little bit. Things don't move a whole lot, as you can see. I mean, things really aren't changing very much. Now moving on to Witcher, this is why I say that the entire picture is not painted with Firestrike. Because if we took Firestrike and said, well, the 970 is performing better than everything, therefore we can draw the conclusion that the 970 is better. Well, guess what? Obviously that's not the case here. The 290X Matrix Platinum, for whatever reason, was getting the most FPS on Witcher 3 on the Ultra settings with the high post-processing preset with Hairworks and all that crap turned off. As you can see, the 970 was 1 FPS below that. But if you look at the 1440p numbers, you can see the 970 did beat the 290X, but matched the 390 Nitro when overclocked. Now, if we sort that by 1440p, you can see the 390 moves up to second place. And if we sort it by 4K, well, look at that. The 390 moves up to first place. So obviously the VRAM is doing its job in the 390 versus the 970, because as the resolution goes up, you can see the 970 starts falling down the charts. Grand Theft Auto 5. Once we sort this here by 1080p, as you can see, the 390 and the 970 are neck and neck at 96 FPS average. But you can see the 390 is 66 FPS versus 64 at 1440, and they both hit 32 at 4K. Once again, the 380 is kind of down here where you'd expect. But if you look at these 1080p numbers, 65 when overclocked or even 57 when stock, these are very respectable numbers for 1080p with 2x MSAA turned on. Once you turn on MSAA, you get a lot of load added to the card because basically it has to kind of super sample the image multiple times, which takes a lot of horsepower to do. And moving on to Metro, this is a canned benchmark, and so it runs through basically the engine and like a little battle scene. So you get the same stress as you would get during the game. So that's why most people will use the benchmark utility. Super sample is off, Tress effects is on normal, motions on normal, and PhysX, which is an NVIDIA technology, is turned off. We don't want any unfair advantages here. So as you can see, once again, 1080p, 102 FPS for the 390, and the 970 trails it again, only 1 FPS lower. But if you look at the 1440 and 4K numbers, you can see we got 3 FPS more at 1440p and 2 FPS more at 4K. It may not sound like a lot at 2 FPS at 4K, but believe it or not, that it takes a lot of bump to get 2 extra FPS on that load. It's 4 times the pixels of 1080p. But when you look down here again at the 380 Nitro, it's just chugging along at 60 and 69, 42 and 37, or 19 and 17. That's why I said ignore the 4K numbers. Really, 380 at 4K, it's not gonna. I mean, look at Witcher, right? 15. Yikes. Anyway, Crysis 3. All right, so as you can see here, 1080p, once again, 63 versus 62 of the 290, and you can see the 970 is falling. It's starting to fall down quite a bit here. 1440p, let's go ahead. Oh, and then, obviously the 380, 51 and 44. Again, respectable FPS. Doesn't hit that magic 60 FPS, not in Crysis anyway. But I want you to look at how close the 380s are, both, the OC and the standard, are to the rest of the numbers versus, say, GTA 5. You see this gap right here, how far this has to go to match up with the rest of these? The fact that Crysis 3, it's much closer, this shows you've got more of an engine optimization thing happening here rather than graphics card performance. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. If we sort by 1440p, you can see the 290X is 1 FPS ahead of the 390, and then the 970, and then 390 stock. So you can see the 970 overclocked is matching the stock 390 Nitro. So 970 overclock versus 390 Nitro. Same exact FPS here. But once you overclock the Nitro, obviously it takes off a bit past the stock 970. Far Cry 4, you can see here, again, very narrow margin, especially at 1440p. I mean, all of them hit 53, 53, 53. That was kind of amazing. 4K, 28, 27, 27. But 81, then 390 pulled out ahead quite a few FPS, and then 380's down here at 52 and 45. And these numbers, again, not the magic 60 FPS, but if we took off some of that 2x MSAA and the HBAO, which is technically an NVIDIA standard. Unfortunately, I've benchmarked with this on, so we'll have to maybe run this again in the future. But You can see here that if you took off 2x MSAA and moved Ultra down to high, these numbers would clearly get the 60 FPS number. And last but not least, Battlefield. This is DirectX, not Mantle. If I ran Mantle, then I wouldn't be able to actually, directly compare these or measure the numbers very well. So 970 is giving us the best performance in 1080p by a couple of FPS. But you can see the 390 at 1440p gives us a little edge. These matched each other in 4K. And you can see down here the 380, 77 and 68. Good numbers for 1080p on the 380. I'm pleased with that. 1440p, once again, bump Ultra down to, say, high or medium, and you get even 1440p would easily be up in the 60s, maybe even higher than that. So there's that. I want to talk about these numbers rather than just show them to you. So tell me how you guys feel about this format. Maybe we'll keep it. Maybe we won't. Back to you, Jay, in the studio. All right, so those are the numbers. Tell me what you guys think. I still think the R9 390 is a fantastically positioned card, if that makes sense. It doesn't destroy your wallet. It doesn't destroy your budget. It gives you great FPS in games, especially if you're not like an FPS Nazi and you're okay with things that are not 100 FPS or 200 FPS, which is honestly a bit ridiculous. Even though I do like those FPSs. FPSs. I don't even know if that's real. Whatever. I'm sick. Now, if you're on a lesser budget, I think the 380 is also a fantastic card for 1080p gaming at medium to high settings. One thing I want to point out, and it might seem unfair for those that would say, well, it's not fair that you took the 380 and you ran it on ultra settings with MSAA. Well, the numbers that you're seeing that are still extremely respectable are at settings that were a bit higher than this card is really placed and aimed at. So that means that your numbers running something like medium or high settings and not ultra and bumping down the MSAA, or even turning that off in some games depending, would only give you better numbers. So you're kind of seeing what the worst case scenario would be with this card, depending on the games that you play. There you go, guys, the Nitro series cards. They also do have, I believe, a 390X in there, but we didn't take a look at that. I've actually not looked at any 390Xs yet. I might have one coming up here very shortly on this channel. Stay tuned for that. But I'm gonna go ahead and get on out of here, guys. R9 390 Nitro, R9 380 Nitro, I think great cards. They do exactly what they're advertised to do, which is give you a great gaming experience in colors that you guys have asked for, at least some of you. Some of you may have been like, I like orange. I don't want black, I want orange. Fine then, go buy an orange one. All right, it's time to get out of here. Thanks for watching, guys, and thank you for 400,000 subscribers. That's crazy. We just might have to get up and do something special for that. All right, see you in the next one.